Hi students, today we will be looking at movement of substances. So movement of substances, we are breaking it up into two different sections. The first section will consist of diffusion and the second section will consist of osmosis. Okay, so diffusion, the highlighted parts are the ones that are the key components. Okay, so net movement meaning to say that when your particles have moved from a region that is higher concentration to a region that is lower in concentration, eventually there will come a time whereby all the particles have evened out in each other. So there's even amount of concentration in all the areas, but it does not mean that the particles are not moving anymore. The particles are still moving, vibrating in their own areas or spots, but it is net. So meaning to say that, let's say for example, when one of the white ones move a little to the left, one of the black one will move a little to the right. Okay, so that is what is known as net movement. And because it is from higher region of concentration to a region of lower concentration, that is down the concentration gradient, and it occurs as a natural process, which is why it is a passive process and it does not require energy. Okay, so we have got over here the passive transport. So passive transport meaning to say energy is not required, and more often than not the energy in this case that we are talking about is ATP. Okay, it's not required in here. So substances or the solutes, it moves from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration here. Okay, so only for substances that are able to pass through things like semi-permeable membrane, etc., that is what we call osmosis, but we will be looking at that later. Okay, so there are some factors that affect the rate of diffusion or how fast diffusion will take place. So firstly, we look at concentration gradient. So the greater the concentration gradient, the greater the rate of diffusion. So what it means, if let's say I have, the most common one is cooking. Okay, so if let's say the cooking smell is extremely concentrated in the kitchen, like for example, if you are cooking an Indian dish versus if you are cooking something that's extremely light, like just boiling normal soup itself, the rate of diffusion of the smells that are stronger, like the Indian cooking, will diffuse much more rapidly than something that is lighter. Okay, so the distance also, if let's say you are very far away from the source of the smell versus you are closer, so the closer it is, the greater the rate of diffusion. Okay, so which is why cell membranes, they are extremely thin, because in order for diffusion of substances, things that are nutrition to move into cells and waste products from the cells to move out, the distance have to be extremely short in order for diffusion to be rapid. Okay, so likewise, increased surface area will increase the rate of diffusion. So the larger the surface area, the larger the rate of diffusion, which is why things like your intestines, we have got these intestinal epithelial cells to increase the rate of diffusion, or even like your root hair cells, you have got your elongated protrusion in order to increase the rate of diffusion. Okay, so the smaller particles will diffuse much faster than the larger particles simply because of the weight. So substances that are soluble in the place that they are dissolving in will also diffuse faster. So for example, if a substance is going to diffuse through our blood plasma, which is about 75% water, and it is water soluble, then it will definitely diffuse much faster compared to something that is fat soluble. Okay, now we have diffusion is the overview. We have got things like your facilitated diffusion. So facilitated diffusion, as the name suggests, means you will have something to facilitate or to help the diffusion of substances. So recall that our cell membrane, we have actually is made up of a phospholipid bilayer. So if we break up the term, it consists of a lipid, and bi means two. So it has got two layers of lipid membrane, so which means that the interior of my cell is scared of water. Hydro means water, phobic means scared. While the exterior, okay, so while the exterior is hydrophilic, hydro means water, philic is to like. The exterior has to be hydrophilic because remember our blood plasma is made up of approximately 75% water. So if you look at it here, these little circles at the top, these are my hydrophilic, Okay, at the bottom also hydrophilic. So these are the ones that are being exposed to the blood plasma outside exterior. The interior component here, this one is hydrophobic. So this is more fatty in nature. So which means that only small particles, okay, only very small particles or particles that are more hydrophobic or oil-like substances will be able to pass through naturally on its own without a carrier. But in the event that we have got small particles that are hydrophilic, or maybe these particles, they are charged, they won't be able to pass through the membrane by itself. So what happens is that we have got a facilitation, and this facilitation is carried out via your channel proteins here. So this is an example of your channel protein. Okay, so this channel protein over here, the interior of this region here is hydrophilic, meaning to say that it loves water. So it is being enclosed by the inside, and when it opens up, these water soluble particles will be able to flow through naturally from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. Okay, so the interior, the blue color markings here, these are your hydrophilic ones because it has to attract the water particles to be able to enter in. Now, the exterior here, this will have to be hydrophobic because it is facing these regions here, which is your hydrophobic tail component. So remember, light and light has to go together. So likewise, here is the hydrophilic, the light ones, and these triangles are the hydrophilic components, the water soluble ones. Okay, so once these are open, it goes in, and then after that it closes if it isn't time to open. Okay, some of these channels, they open and close like gates. Okay, so gates meaning to say that they will receive a signal. So things like, for example, it receives a charge or it receives a particle to signal it to open, and once it receives that particular signal, it opens up, substances flow in. When the signal shuts off, then the channels will be closed itself, and therefore the particles can no longer enter in. Okay, so you have got facilitated diffusion. Another type is whereby it binds and it changes the conformation of it here. Okay, so over here you have got a trigger. So you have this one, a lipid insoluble molecule, so meaning to say that it is too big. So it comes in, it binds to here. So once it binds, it will then change the conformation. So this one binds, the top components here will now close tips towards each other, and it will be exposing the ones that has binded, and this will then be released into the cell component. Okay, so it binds first and then it releases the transported molecule into the cell without much of an issue, compared to if it were just to be waiting outside, it won't be able to pass into the phospholipid bilayer. And then the next part, why is diffusion so important for us? So unlike small organisms or what we call unicellular organisms are single cell organisms. Things like your parasanium and your amoeba, they can just take in substances from the surroundings by simple diffusion, and they can release the waste products that they accumulate back into the surroundings via normal diffusion or simple diffusion. But for more complex organisms like animals and plants, multicellular organisms, we need a system. Okay, and throughout this entire system, we have got diffusion taking place to allow the exchange of your substances, be it the food, nutrition, oxygen, or waste products, into the atmosphere or to the surroundings. Okay, so humans here release carbon dioxide into the environment. So this alveoli here is part of the lungs region. So carbon dioxide is being removed out from the blood plasma into the alveoli, and then it will then move out when you exhale out. So likewise, when you are inhaling in, okay, breathing in, oxygen will then come in through diffusion. It will then bind to the red blood cell, and then it will be carried to other parts of the body system. Okay, so another process in humans, we have got digestion, whereby once you eat things like, for example, the carbohydrates will then be digested into glucose, and these glucose will diffuse into the bloodstream from the small intestines. So when it diffuses from the small intestines into the bloodstream, it can now enter cells for aerobic respiration to provide energy. Okay, in root hair cells, whereby we have got that elongated structure. Okay, we have got this elongated component here. Okay, this protrusion, so recap earlier on mentioned, it increases the surface area to volume ratio. So this part here is able to enable rapid diffusion of my minerals and nutrients from the surroundings into the root hair cell, and then when it reaches into the root hair cell, it will then go into the surrounding cells. Okay, and it will continue on and on and on until it reaches the required regions. Okay, so these are the uptake of your substances that is required. At the same time, we also remove metabolic waste. So metabolic waste is waste products that are being produced during metabolism of the substances in the body, which you will learn more when you do nutrition. Okay, so some examples will be things like ammonia, excess water when we have to go to the toilet, mineral salts, etc., so on and so forth. So that is to maintain a competent environment in the body system and to keep everything in balance. Okay, so the next part we'll be looking at osmosis, which is a type of diffusion but only for water molecules. Whereas for diffusion that we looked at, it is for almost every type of molecule. Okay, so we'll look at the next one next. Thank you.